In this video, I'm going to show how you can generate PDFs of invoices in your Bubble app using DocuPotion. You can see here we've designed the PDF template of an invoice in our DocuPotion dashboard. And if we go back to our Bubble app and click on this Generate Invoice button, we're going to create a PDF of that template and also populate it with our own custom data. So you can see here we have a number of line items in the table. We have the customer name in here, and we can populate this with other dynamic data too. So I'm going to go through all of that. I want to start off by looking at our database structure. You'll see here in our database we have two data types outside of the standard user data type. The first one is invoice, and you can see here we have a number of fields. We have the customer address, the customer name, the invoice number, all of which are text fields, and then also the due date and this list of invoice items. Because what we're going to do is we're going to have a separate data type for our invoice overall and then our individual invoice items. So this might be something like materials or consultation or labor or whatever. But we're linking each of the invoice items to the invoice by using this list of invoice items here. And if we look at our app data, I've just created two sample invoice items. You can see here, one is materials, price of 200, quantity 4, and then consultation as well, price of 500 and quantity 1. So we're going to use all this data to create a PDF of an invoice in our Bubble application. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go to DocuPotion.com. We're going to sign up for a free account here, and I'm just going to put in my details. And once you've signed up for a DocuPotion account, you're going to have access to the DocuPotion dashboard. And you'll see here, if we click on the quick start guides, there's a number of ways we can get started creating PDFs, and two specific to our Bubble integration. But the one we're interested in at the moment is this quick start Bubble integration, creating a PDF from a template. And this goes through all the steps you need to generate PDFs from a template, which is what we're going to be building. We've already completed step 1. But now we're going to need to install the DocuPotion Bubble plugin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my plugins tab in my Bubble editor. I'm going to click add plugins and I'm going to search for DocuPotion. We can install it here. And if we scroll down to the bottom of this plugin page, you'll see here there's a number of fields that we can add details to. The only ones we're concerned about for generating a PDF of our invoice is the API key and the API key dev. And if we go back to our quick start guide, you'll see here to generate an API key, we just need to click on the My Account tab, click on Generate API Key. I'm then going to copy that to my clipboard by clicking that little icon there. I'm going to go back to my Bubble editor and I'm going to paste that API key into here and into here. It's the same API key for the live and the dev versions. Now, please do keep this API key secure. It's perfectly safe to paste it in here, but I am going to delete this specific API key after this video. Okay, so we've added our API key, and if we want to design our PDF in the template editor, which is what our next step is going to be, we're going to go to the templates tab of our DocuPotion dashboard, and you can see we haven't created any templates yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this Create New Template button. I'm going to name my template and I'm going to call this Test Invoice. At the moment, there's only one option in terms of a template, which is a blank template. There will be more added soon, but for now, we're just going to click Create Template. And you can see we're brought to the DocuPotion editor. This is where we can drag and drop components onto the canvas and allow our invoice to look exactly how we want. So I'm going to delete this default text component that was already on the page. I'm then going to grab this other text component that I have just dropped in. I'm going to put it in the top left here. I'm going to call it Invoice. I'm going to change the font size to 32 pixels. I'm also going to highlight it within its text box, and I'm going to do Command B to bold it. I'm then going to grab another text component just below it, and I'm going to say invoice number, and then I'm going to leave the next part blank because we're going to fill that in dynamically in just a bit. I'm going to drag this over to align it, and I might want to add, let me just put this up here. We might want to add a company logo. We're going to be sending this invoice to a customer and we want a logo to represent our company. So I'm going to grab this image component and put it in the top right hand side of our PDF template. And we can specify an image via URL, or we can simply upload one via this upload image button. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add in an image there. I'm going to change the dimensions to 180 by 60. And then we have our image component. Put that over there. Perfect. Okay, the next thing I want to do is add in another text component for the customer address. So let's do that. I'm going to grab that here. I'm going to say, put it down here maybe, and say bill to, and I'm just going to put in a static placeholder customer address for now, and then we're going to populate it with dynamic data in a bit. So I'm just going to say 456 Main Street, LA. And again, I'm going to bold the bill to. What I might do is actually put in a line here just to divide the sections up. So if I grab that here, I'm going to increase the width to, let's say, 720, and then change the color of this to that, bring down the opacity to there. Yeah, pretty happy with that, how that looks. Okay, move that up. So what do we have? We have invoice number, bill to, and then we probably also want to put in the customer name here as well. So this is a good way to show you how you can put in dynamic data, or at least begin that process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in here these curly braces, 2 for each side, and I'm going to type in customer name. I'm going to extend this down. I want to unbold this. And before I move on to designing the rest of the invoice, I want to go to this preview tab. This is where you get a sense of how your PDF is actually going to look. And for the most part, everything pretty much resembles what we have in the editor. We have our invoice text, our invoice number, our image, our bill to, but you will notice we have John Doe in here for the customer name. And the reason is whenever you add these curly braces around a text expression in the DocuPotion editor, DocuPotion is smart enough to know that that's going to be a dynamic variable. And if we go to our data tab, it's grabbing all the dynamic variables, putting them in here, and it's putting in some placeholder values. So let's just say we add another text component somewhere. And in fact, what would be a good example instead of adding a new one is after invoice number, let's say we put in these curly braces again, and we put in invoice number. Let's extend that out. And if we go back to our preview tab, again, you can see here we have some numbers showing up here, even though we haven't specified any numbers. And if we go to data, we have those numbers here. So again, DocuPotion is seeing that we're making this a dynamic variable, and it's populating with some placeholder data. Now, this isn't the data that's actually going to show up in our end PDF, because it could be different depending on what data we send to DocuPotion in a bit. But it's just a way of representing what it might look like when you go to generate your PDFs. Okay, I want to get into the real core of designing this invoice template, because what we're going to do now is we're going to drag a dynamic table component into our canvas, and we're going to use this to represent the line items in our invoice. You might remember from our Bubble database, we have these 2 invoice items, and we're going to design this dynamic table so that it's going to be able to show an uncertain amount of line items. In our case, it's going to be 2, but in other cases, you might have 20. So we want this dynamic table component to be able to handle any number of invoice items. You can do a few things with the table. If you click on a specific column, you can delete it. It's going to do that. You can also, if you click on the table as a whole, you can add in other columns, but we're actually going to stay with the defaults today because they suit our needs quite well. Okay, let's take a look at our preview tab now that we've dropped this dynamic table component in. And again, you can see PDFPotion is putting in some placeholder values here, but we're obviously going to want to change these. And I think it actually might be a good time to start generating some of these PDFs, and then we can adjust things as we go to make it look exactly like we want. So let's go back to our Bubble editor and let's go to this button here, this generate invoice button. I'm going to click on add workflow. I'm going to add an action. And because I've installed the DocuPotion plugin, I'm going to have access to this create PDF from template action. And you can see here, there's 2 things we need. We need the template ID, and then we also need to add some JSON data that's going to populate the PDF. Let's start off with the template ID because that's super easy. But before I do, I must remember to actually save my template down. So I'm going to click on the save button. You can see when everything is saved, we get this green check mark. We can grab our template ID either from the dashboard by clicking on this back button, or simply by grabbing it here from the top right hand corner. So I'm going to paste the template ID in there. And let's start off by just generating one with no dynamic data. In order to actually download it in our browser, what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to go to plugins. I'm going to go to download PDF from base 64. That's the format that DocuPotion is returning the PDF in. So we're going to go insert dynamic data, result of step 1. It's base 64 content. For the file name, I'm simply going to put in invoice. Okay, so let's just create a PDF of our template as it stands without even sending any dynamic data. I'm going to click on generate invoice. And you can see here, we've downloaded an invoice and we have some of the data. We have invoice, we have Cranford Tech, we do not have the invoice number, we don't have the customer name, and we have nothing in our table. So let's start filling out that data by using our JSON field here. And let's just take a look at our editor. You can see here, one thing we can fill in is the invoice number. So let's do that. And if I remember right, in our database for invoice, which I didn't actually go through to be fair, we do have this field here called invoice number. So let's reference that. What I'm going to do on this JSON data field is I'm going to start off by putting in our curly braces. I'm then going to put in some quotation marks. I'm going to type in exactly the variable that I have here, which is going to be invoice number. Close those quotation marks, put in our colon, put in more quotation marks, insert dynamic data. I'm going to do a search for invoice because I only have the one in my database. I'm going to get the first item's invoice number, and then I'm going to close my quotations as well. So let's try to generate another PDF. Let's open this one up. So this is the old one, and then the new one, you can see we do have our dynamic data. So let's start building that out a bit more. For build 2, what we can do is we can add in the customer name, which is customer name. So let's put in a comma, quotation marks again, customer name, quotation marks, colon. And again, this time we'll do a search for invoice, first items, and then customer name. And then let's close our quotation marks. Take a look at our template again. Yeah, so we want to get dynamic data in this table here. And if we click on the table, we'll see that the default data type is set to items. And if we go over to our data tab, we'll see here we have an array of 3 items. Now, items is the default, and that could actually work pretty well for our means here today. But whatever you put as the data type here, and I'm going to put products, that must match whatever you put in your JSON here. And the structure we want is basically a key name, which is going to be products. So I'm going to go here, put another comma, products, colon, and this is where it gets a bit tricky. This is where formatting JSON data in Bubble isn't necessarily the easiest. But if we look at our data tab again, and we look at the raw JSON tab of our data tab, this is the format we need. We need this bracket all the way down here. We actually only need 2 items. But again, we want to build this so we can have, as many items as we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this. I'm going to put this to here. So I'm basically grabbing the first item in the array. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to add it in like that. Put a space in. So that's what we want, but this is obviously static data, which isn't really going to do much for us. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go do a search for invoice items because that's what we want to put in here. And then I'm going to use the bubble format as a text operator to basically replicate this structure here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy all this, grab it, we'll close that down and close the square bracket there. But in our format as text, I'm going to paste this in here. I'm going to get rid of the comma here and I'm going to put it in as a delimiter. So we're basically going to get a new item in our array every time there's a comma. Don't need to do this, but just to kind of tidy it up, we're going to put this in here. And then this is the fun part. So this is where we can put in the dynamic data. So instead of name, I'm going to put in this invoice item's product name. Instead of price being a static 99.99, I'm going to leave the $sign in there because we're using all JSON strings here. I'm going to put in this invoice item's price. For quantity, as you might expect, I'm going to put in this invoice item's quantity. And then for total, I'm going to put in this invoice item's price multiplied by this invoice item's quantity. And I'm going to put a $sign in front of that. Perfect. Okay, let's see how that looks. Just going to put a comma. Do we need to put a comma here? No, we don't actually. Okay, let's create an invoice again. And I'm actually going to put it in step-by-step mode just so I can show you the JSON come through. So I'm going to go generate invoice, create PDF from template, and this is the JSON that we've created. We already knew the invoice number and the customer name, but now we have these products. So you can see that's our first invoice item, consultation, and then this is the second one, the materials. So let's do that. Okay, let's download it, open it up, and we're still not getting the data coming through there. So there was an issue with our JSON. Let me just take a look at it again. Or I wonder, do you know what, I bet I forgot to save it down. Yeah, we're after changing the data source here from products, from items to products, and I never saved it down. So let's save it down. We are passing through products. Let's try it again. Generate invoice. And this one looks like a bigger file size. So yeah, there we go. That's coming through. So just to finish off, maybe let's put in a grand total because obviously we have the line items here, but we don't have the total amount. So what I might do is back in our template editor, I'm going to select the row of the table by clicking on this row selection bar. I'm just going to set a bottom border here as well. So I'll put that up there. Okay. Bottom style is going to be solid. And the bottom width is just going to be 1. If I take a preview, yeah, that looks a bit better. In fact, what I might do is just reduce the opacity on that a bit. Open that up again. Yeah, I think that's a bit better. Okay, I'm going to grab another text component then from up here, and this is going to be our grand total effectively. So we'll put that there. We'll align it in the center, and we will put in the dynamic expression. So our curly braces again, grand total. Let's just take a look at our data, and let's just say the grand total, what's it actually going to be? It's going to be $1,300. So let's say grand total here is going to be 1,300. And let's just make sure that we have the right space here. What do we have for these? 500 by 1. And then, what was the second one? 200 by 4. We need 2. And again, this is just preview data, but I just want to get a sense that it's going to line up properly. So okay, that looks good. Let's take a look at our preview. Yeah, pretty happy with that actually. Okay, let's put in our grand total dynamic variable there. So let's go here. Let's add in one more after products, comma, new line, double quotations, grand total, close the double quotations. And then ideally you would just do a search for a single value, but we haven't set our database up that way. You could look about multiplying two lists by each other, but that does get quite tricky. So I'd actually recommend for this setup here is to actually in your database on the invoice itself, what I would do is I would add in a data field called total, have it as a number, and I would actually structure a bubble app so that all the invoice items in here actually add up to the total, which in our case is going to be what? $1,300. So yeah, just to kind of keep things simple, I'm going to put this in here, 1,300. And again, you're going to be referencing the invoice in your own way, but what I'm just going to do is do a search for invoice. We only have one, so I'm going to go with the first items. I'm going to go with its total. We will finally put the $sign inside there again, and we will close double quotations, and that should be our invoice ready to go. So let's refresh. Click the button again. And let's open up our PDF. And we're still not getting that through because I can see the formatting once again. I forgot to save it. Save down, generate invoice again. Open it up. And we can see here we have our grand total, we have our other formatting, with the dynamic data there and there. So yeah, that's how you can build an invoice PDF in Bubble. Hope that's been useful. If you do have any questions, you can let me know in the comment section below.